All right, let's dive into a wild theory that's been making the rounds on Reddit. It all started with a claim from a lawyer who was around during Watergate, and it's a big one. The idea that Donald Trump might have been a confidential FBI informant in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. So, let's break down how this whole theory got started and where it went. So, everything we're about to talk about really kicked off from just one single allegation. But from there, man, it just exploded into this huge online debate with everyone trying to piece together the clues and figure out what was really going on. And this is the question at the heart of it all. Was he an informant? And, if he was, what does that even mean? Because according to this whole online discussion, the answer is definitely not what you'd think. And right off the bat, you get this comment from Reddit user Montalaskin, and it just perfectly sets up the main conflict. The idea here isn't about some kind of heroic undercover hero. No, the theory suggests the motivation was something way, way darker and a lot more selfish.
And that's where the whole thing splits into two completely different stories that people were arguing about. Was this person acting like a hero, or were they just a snitch trying to save their own neck?
So here you can see the two camps. On one side, you've got what's called the white hat theory, the good guy, infiltrating the bad guys to bring them down for the sake of justice. But then you have the self-preservation theory, and this is where almost everyone in the discussion landed. They believe he was already part of it, got caught, and turned informant to get a deal.
And yeah, this quote from user digitalion_ really kind of sums up the general feeling in that thread. The argument being made is that this had nothing to do with doing the right thing. It was all about avoiding trouble, or maybe just getting back at someone.
Okay, so to really get what these users are talking about, we have to figure out what they mean by the term informant, because, as you'll see, the definition here is absolutely crucial.
One user just put it perfectly. They're making a super clear distinction here. In this context, an informant is not some cool undercover agent. In the criminal justice world, it's way, way closer to being a snitch who got caught and is now singing to the cops to get a better deal.
And this is pretty much the consensus across the board. People kept using words like snitch, stool pigeon, or, my favorite, the first person to get caught. The basic idea they're all working with is that to even be an informant in the first place, you've pretty much got to be a criminal yourself. All right, now this is where the story gets a little weird and cryptic. As their evidence, users started pointing to this very strange phrase, one that Jeffrey Epstein himself supposedly used when talking about Trump. And here it is. User C-Husk brings it up directly. The dog that hasn't barked. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a detective novel, right? Well, according to the people on Reddit, that's pretty much exactly what it is.
So, what on earth is that supposed to mean? What kind of clue is that? And how did people on this thread even begin to decode it?
Well, get this. The phrase is a direct reference to a Sherlock Holmes story, and in the story the dog didn't bark because it knew the person who came in the night. So the user's interpretation is that Epstein was using this as a kind of veiled threat or accusation, basically saying that Trump's silence on the whole matter was itself proof that he knew what was going on and was maybe even cooperating.
But it doesn't stop there. Of course not. From this point, the theory just starts to spiderweb out. Users start trying to connect this whole informant idea to other powerful people, and one name comes up again and again: former Attorney General William Barr.
So users started laying out this chain of events. Check it out. First, way back when, William Barr's dad hires a young Jeffrey Epstein, who had basically no qualifications. Fast forward a few decades, and William Barr is now the Attorney General. And then Epstein dies, under very suspicious circumstances, in a federal prison that Barr's Justice Department oversees. For a lot of these commenters, that's just too much of a coincidence. And the speculation got really, really specific. I mean, you have users like Captain_Cabnets who are analyzing the handwriting on Epstein's supposed suicide note and claiming it's a dead ringer for Barr's. It just goes to show you how deep down the rabbit hole this whole discussion went.
And all of this leads us to the final piece of the puzzle: motive.
Okay, let's just say for a second this theory is true. Why? Why would he do it? What could possibly be the reason? Well, the thread came up with a few different possibilities. The most popular one is that he got caught and cut a deal to save himself. But others suggested it might have been pure spite, that he and Epstein had a falling out over some real estate deal. And another theory, that the FBI already had something else on him, some totally different crime, and they used that as leverage to make him cooperate. You know, user Hungry for Nuns brings up a really interesting ethical point here. They're basically saying, yeah, maybe exposing a criminal ring is a good thing, but the motive is what makes it unethical. If you're only doing it to save yourself, or worse, to use it as a weapon against your personal enemies. And that really is the question that hangs over this entire conversation. At the end of the day, if a massive criminal operation gets taken down, does it actually matter why the informant did it, or is getting the bad guys the only thing that counts? It's the central debate of this whole theory, and it definitely leaves you with a lot to chew on.